Hi, and welcome back to Hill and Ponton's VA Disability blog. I'm Natalia Jofre, the company COO.
And I'm attorney Rachel Cheek.
And as you know, we are continuing our series as we work from home, obviously due to the ongoing pandemic and just trying to do our part with social distancing. But we want to continue to bring you this information because we feel it's just too important to wait. And speaking of COVID, Rachel, we talked about this. We had posted a blog a couple of weeks ago regarding things that were going on in the VA as a result of COVID-19 and what they were doing in response to it. And so, now we're kind of progressing within this ongoing pandemic. So I think it's important for us to give people an update as to what's going on. So the first question that we've gotten from a lot of vets is the VA doing anything to help expedite the claims of veterans who have contracted COVID-19?
Yes, great question. I'm glad you started off with that. So, just a little background why we're updating is we recently received some new updates from the VA and some information, a little more guidance as to how they're handling certain things around COVID as this goes on. So, we have more information than we did a couple weeks ago when we posted. And so, as far as your question is if VA is doing anything to help expedite claims, as to the regional office, I can't speak to that, but I know at the board, they are accepting advancement on the docket motions for veterans who've contracted COVID. So that's something where if, and the claim that you have does not have to be related to COVID. So say
Okay.
you've got a claim for service connection for diabetes, but you've contracted COVID-19. And in the meantime, as your claim is pending, you can file an advancement on the docket with the board, let them know, hey, I've contracted this illness, it could be serious, can my case please be considered in a more timely fashion? So the board
Hmm.
is accepting those sorts of motions. I don't know how many they're granting, what the timeline to hear back on a response is, but the fact that they've come out and said that this is something that they're accepting, I'm going to probably, it seems like they're taking a pretty liberal view on COVID-19 situations. So I would imagine that'd be pretty likely to be granted.
Right. Okay, great. How about C&P exams? We know there was a lot swirling around. How are the handling of C&P exams going? Any updates on those?
Yes. So when we last talked, I believe we talked about how some, obviously, they can't have in person CP exams. That's not
Yes. So
practical.
that's continuing. Still none in person.
Correct.
Okay.
In some cases, what the VBA has done is they've come out with a list of some conditions that can be done over like either video conference or through telehealth. So,
Hmm.
examples of some of those conditions that could have those exams in place of in person is any mental health condition,
Hmm.
hypertension, intestinal conditions, diabetes, headaches, chronic fatigue, prostate cancer, sleep apnea, kind of anything that you can think of that you would not require you to actually be in the room. That is something that the doctor either way has to go off of your word.
Hmm.
So an exception to things that, so something that couldn't be done over the phone or telehealth, for example, would be orthopedic cases where the doctor would have to, or the examiner would have to measure your range of motion. You can't do that over a video. You
Right.
have to physically do that. So as for those exams, those there's no substitute for those right now.
Okay.
In some cases, I don't know the particular. There's no guidance as to what particular conditions the VA is doing this for, but I know in some cases, rather than have the vet do a C&P exam, even if it is telehealth, what they'll have is the examiner will look over the record, look over the evidence that already exists, and fill out the form from there.
Okay.
Uh,
So
knowing
that may be.
how Oh, I was gonna say, knowing how, thoroughly that things get reviewed sometimes in the normal course of C&P exams, that makes me nervous, but, we'll see.
And I guess what's important to remind people, because obviously we've had significant issues with C&P exams in the past, with either they weren't thorough or they weren't accurate or the findings were very questionable. There's always appeals. And 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 I think that people need to remember that. Sometimes we get clients calling us, and they're very angry, they're very frustrated because they'll say, this doctor flat out lied, this isn't true. And what they need to know, or maybe take a little bit of comfort in, is the fact that those findings can always be appealed, right? I
Mhm.
mean, the C&P exam isn't the end all be all of your claim.
Exactly. Might be the step to a denial, but that's not the end of the road necessarily.
And we keep talking about the new normal, and so I think that in keeping in mind the new normal, maybe having that new type of C&P exam where they are looking at your records is better than the claim being delayed, rather than them saying, well, you know what, we're just not going to make a decision, or we're going to postpone your C&P exam for 6 months or a year,
Mhm.
and we're not going to make a decision until then. So I think that within the norm of things, maybe this is the best possible solution. Would, I mean, is that
I,
how you all kind of feel about it?
I think so. I think it's better to have your claim moving and being processed than to just sit in the standstill purgatory
Yeah, yeah.
the VA can become.
Yeah. So speaking of things that normally happen in person, how are they handling hearings? What are they doing with those?
So for the regional office, at the regional office level, a lot of obviously, again, personal hearings are canceled. They're not having any of those, the in-person
Hmm.
hearings, rather, I should say. We are getting a lot of calls from decision review officers who work at the regional office level. If a veteran was scheduled for a formal hearing, we're getting calls from the DROs who are asking if we would prefer to have it informal conference.
Uh-huh.
And the way that's done is, if we agree, then the DRO will give the representative, so us, or if you're going pro bono or representing yourself, in that case you would have the conference with the decision review officer, and it's essentially the same opportunity to present your evidence as it would be a formal hearing, but it is informal. It's on the
Hmm.
telephone. You can be more frank with the decision review officer. You can let them know what types of evidence that you're disagreeing with, or what evidence you have to support, kind of summarize your argument. So
Hmm.
that's something we do a lot in the normal course of
Okay.
business anyway. So I haven't seen any, there's the decisions are not any worse than would be coming out with a formal hearing,
Okay. So,
in my
because I was going
opinion.
to ask you that, yeah, in terms of, did you like or dislike informal hearings versus, or informal conferences versus hearings? So, in general,
Yes, it's nice to talk to somebody. It's nice to actually be able to make that person to person connection. You don't always, sometimes the evidence isn't there, and sometimes the decision review officer disagrees with
hmm,
what the evidence shows. But it's nice, you can at least know. Usually, you have a sense of what to expect after you've
hmm,
done the informal conference.
right.
And if for whatever reason you don't want to do an informal conference, you can request to postpone your formal hearing if that's something that's really important. You want to, go there physically in person. I wouldn't recommend it because at this time we don't know when they're going to start those back up again. But if
Yeah.
that's an issue for you, you can request to postpone your formal hearing rather than have an informal conference.
Right. Okay. Okay. Good. We obviously know a lot of people are going through a lot of hard financial hardship, and so it begs the question: is the VA still collecting on debts the way they normally
Mhm.
do or would?
So right now, the VA has been understanding this is a very difficult time for very many people, and so debt collections are suspended right now. That doesn't mean canceled. That yeah, doesn't mean they're going to just totally wipe it out and forget about it. But
Right.
they're suspending their normal collection actions, so they're not referring delinquent payments to credit reporting agencies at this time. They're
Good.
not starting new collections. They are offering temporary suspensions for existing debts, or extended repayment plans. So they're being understanding. However, again, the debt is not getting wiped out if you owe
Yeah.
anything. So don't
Yeah.
just forget about it. Um, but there, you may have some options where you may not have had before, as far as a little extra time to get things in order, or if you're on a payment plan and you need to kind of tweak it a little bit. The VA is
Yeah.
being more understanding with that.
Well, that's a glimmer of good news.
Mhm.
I keep telling everyone, or including all of our employees, let's try to focus on the positive. There is
Yes.
positive out there. So even though it's not a complete, dismissal of the debt, at least there's a little bit of consideration there.
Mhm.
So one of the other things that we talked about last time was the deadlines and whether
Mhm.
there were going to be extensions on deadlines. And, there's a lot of questions about that because a lot of people have been in these very difficult circumstances and perhaps couldn't file their appeal or whatever in time.
Mhm.
So is there any additional guidance on the deadlines and whether there's any extension on those?
Yes. So, in generally, the VA will grant extensions for what they call good cause. Of course,
Hmm.
there's no specifics on what good cause is. Suffice it to say, it's not, oh, well, I forgot the deadline was yesterday, so I didn't file it. That's not going to be a
Right.
good cause. Good cause
Hmm.
is I was in the hospital for the past 3 weeks because I, got in a really bad accident, or I was really sick and I couldn't do this. And the VA has determined that COVID-19 cases do constitute good cause. So if, say, you were delayed filing this, you couldn't get to the, you needed to go to a certain place to fax it, and they're not open, or you contracted the disease, or someone that you're taking care of contracted the disease, and you were not able to file. I think that you can make an argument that that constitutes good cause.
Hmm.
What the VA is asking that you do is, when you file whatever late documentation, evidence, whatever it is that you're needing the extension on, they don't require a specific form, but you do have to tell them, this is late. I'm requesting an extension due to COVID-19. They're not requiring supporting evidence on this, so they're not saying, okay, cool, send us your doctor bills. But you do need to specify, I got the disease, my spouse got the disease. Something happened where, because of the situation relating to how we're handling COVID, I wasn't able to get this filed on time.
Right. Right.
Similarly, from starting in March, on March 1st, 2020, if a veteran or their representative requests an extension of a time limit, or says they can't attend a hearing or a telehealth examination due to COVID-19, VA is supposed to grant that extension
Mhm. Mhm.
or reschedule.
Okay. Good, good. So some more good news there.
Yes, yes.
That's great. Speaking of good news, I'm sure you're following the same trends. We're seeing that some businesses are starting to open back up in some states, some more than others. So along those same lines, are VA offices starting to reopen? Look at that head shaking. Nope. No, no, no.
Not
So
yet. They're still
not yet.
federal, so
Yeah.
they're going to be directed by federal guidelines rather than state to state.
Okay, great. I do want to mention, just because we touched on that point of businesses reopening, and we know that a lot of people were truly suspended in the work that they could do, or in the type of work that they could do. And fortunately, a lot of people were able to send their employees to work from home, but they weren't working at full capacity because they weren't prepared for it. I do want to mention, so law firms are considered essential businesses. So we were never required to be closed at all. And we were so incredibly fortunate because we had already tested absolutely our entire workforce to work remotely from home before this ever happened. So we never even had to close down for even an hour. I mean, we never stopped. So I just want to reiterate to everyone that we are open. We have been open. There was no effect in terms of the claim processing for our office on any of our cases, because we were able to transition everyone to work from home. It's a little bit challenging at times, to move an entire practice, but but we were able to do it, and I think that we were lucky in that regard, because I know that a lot of other places weren't ready for it, kind of caught off guard. So, Rachel, some veterans are concerned because they receive VA benefits, but because of the types of benefits that they receive, they don't necessarily file for taxes. So, will they still be eligible for these stimulus checks that the government is issuing? Because what I've heard and what I know is that a lot of them are based on their tax returns. So how are they handling that for veterans that don't file taxes regularly?
So, if you receive any kind of VA disability or pension benefits,
Hmm.
even though you don't file taxes, the VA they have that information, with the IRS, or the IRS has access to that information. So you will still receive a check, even though you don't file taxes, as long as you're receiving disability pension or I'm sorry, VA disability or VA pension benefits.
Okay. Okay. Great. Well, this was all super helpful. Thank you, Rachel. I
You're
appreciate
welcome.
it. Thank you for joining us. We hope you'll do so again. But in the meantime, if you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to visit our website or call our office.